What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so continuing on with the events of Justice League No Justice, again, this is kind of cool here, and I really like what Snyder's doing. It's one of these really interesting ideas, right? I mean, like Galactus meets the Celestials. It's kind of cool, and really, like, for those of you guys who have read Marvel Comics for a long time, the Omega Titans really are a lot more like the Celestials, or really more of a great blend of the Celestials, rather, and Galactus than anything else, because the idea of the story up to this point has basically been that, like, Brainiac showed up on Earth and basically gathered the most prominent superheroes on Earth, basically the Teen Titans, the Magic Wielders, and the Justice League, and then split them up into separate teams, and then in turn took them to the planet Colu and basically said, when you broke the Source Wall, you essentially unleashed the Omega Titans. Now, the cool thing about that, and that's one of the great things about this whole thing, is that for those of you guys who are new anyway, when it comes to comic book publishers, you have what are called soft reboots, then you have hard reboots, you have relaunches like what Marvel does, which is basically calling it a reboot, but it's not really, and then you have what's kind of like an event that will shuffle things around. And that's really what this is. This is an event that shuffles things around. And the idea is that with the Source Wall having been cracked in the aftermath of Dark Knight's Metal, it's almost like the circumstance whereby everyone who was trapped in the Source Wall was released. Now, of course, DC has kind of removed that from continuity, and we know that because the Source Wall is still there, and everybody who was in the Source Wall seems to still be trapped. So I think that's kind of been removed, and that's really not something that happens anymore, or really didn't happen at all. But the fact remains, with the Source Wall cracked, it means that things can come from outside of the main DC universe or the main DC multiverse, but it would also allow for DC to kind of pick and choose what gets released from the Source Wall. For example, we may see a story in the future where we see the return of Imperiex, who was actually a really interesting villain in the late 1990s. It was about as close as DC ever actually got to Galactus, in the sense that, like, Imperiex, when the Justice League first encountered Imperiex, they faced off against it only to realize that it was basically a drone, and the actual Imperiex was insanely powerful, was far more powerful than that drone was. So there's really cool elements. Of course, Yuka Khan, the father of Darkseid, is someone that we will probably see emerge from the Source Wall from Hal Jordan in the Green Lantern Corps. We saw that in that story, but there's cool little things that go on. The other part of this is that in the last video we had talked about how the planet Colu basically had this kind of like all these different worlds that had basically been confined, and that was a hallmark of Brainiac. Ever since Brainiac really showed up in the early days of DC, and even going forward in terms of fleshing his character out, his main MO was basically traveling around the universe and then, like, capturing worlds or cities and then bottling them, hence the concept of the bottled city of Kandor. But what this does is it basically allows DC to kind of come along and say, well, these various worlds that you thought were destroyed were never actually destroyed. Instead, they were just captured and bottled by Brainiac, and they were left here on Colu, and it's just been that way ever since. The idea is that with all these worlds basically being discovered, there's still life on these worlds. And so in response, you basically have, like, the telepaths, Martian Manhunter, Starro, who are really, like, hearing from all the voices in this world. And the idea is to essentially make these trees grow, right? Like, the tree of entropy and wisdom and mystery and all that kind of good stuff. But the idea is that in any one particular world, these Omega Titans had kind of like planted seeds, so to speak. Because this seed exists, whatever aspect of these four concepts the planet grows towards, that in turn will summon that Omega Titan. So for example, on Colu, it's really all about, like, wisdom. It's about, like, experience, knowledge, things like that. And so because it's about wisdom, that tree has the most energy, or really it's the only tree that's alive, and it summons the wisdom Omega Titan. With this in mind, after basically coming across Brainiac 2.0, where the superheroes of Earth are kind of continuing on this campaign and saying, hey, look, like, we can save the planet. Ultimately, the response to Brainiac 2.0 is, no, you can't. And the reason why is because all of this is predicated on the nature of Brainiac, where Brainiac is a villain that has historically always had nefarious tendencies, where there have been events like Convergence, things like that, where Brainiac's kind of been reworked and reshuffled and been changed around and different things like that, and where, like, various stories over the course of DC's publication history have given us other, future iterations of Brainiac. The fact remains here that, as most fans know him, he's a villain. He's a main villain of Superman and a main villain of Earth. The argument of Brainiac 2.0 is nothing is what you think it is. Your idea was Brainiac brought you here under the auspices that each of you had some component. He split you into teams because those of you in those teams possess a level of power that would allow to sort of rebalance everything, to restore life to all the trees, and in turn send the Omega Titan away. But the response of Brainiac 2.0 is that's not true. The whole reason why you're here is because this is the one planet Brainiac was never able to conquer. And so because that, his goal is to basically take take over the world, like take over this planet. The idea was to use you guys to restore balance, quote unquote, to the four trees. The Omega Titans would leave and they would immediately travel to Earth. And because all the superheroes, for the most part, reside on Earth minus the Green Lantern Corps, all that would be left would be the Lantern Corps. That would be it. And so with there being like no more Superman, no more Wonder Woman, Batman, or any of that stuff, then like the universe would be ripe for the picking. Basically, you were brought here to set the stage for Brainiac to conquer the universe. And it's kind of interesting because the response of Beast Boy is like, no, that's not true and you're lying. We have to believe that this world can be saved. So it's really, you know, hopeful idealism in the face of what is really nothing more than impending death. And so it's kind of cool because from here, you basically switch over to Team Wonder. You pick up with Wonder Woman and Etrigan, as well as Raven and Dr. Fate. And then of course, Zatanna. And this is kind of interesting because Wonder Woman really kind of takes the reins here. And Wonder Woman's idea is, I've been blessed with magic by the gods. And it's interesting that Snyder blends these two things because where Etrigan and these guys are kind of like, look, she's not really a magic wielder. She has magic insofar that like godly beings granted her powers. She's not a tried and true magic wielder. But the response of Wonder Woman is, well, I can pull this off. Wonder Woman uses her lasso of truth, which basically imbues the tree with magic of sorts and in turn like awakens the tree. And this is kind of intriguing because if I'm being honest here, I feel like it's kind of Snyder's way of saying like, I really like Wonder Woman, so I want her to be able to use magic, which is not a bad thing. I mean, I would say up until recent years, with the exception of stories like Hikatea, Wonder Woman never really seemed to get her due. She was just a chick who was there. This is Scott Snyder grabbing the Wonder Woman mythos and saying, she's not just a chick who got some magical tools from the gods, that they really are imbued with magic. And she really is part of that magic community, whether we really want to acknowledge that or not. So again, it's Snyder's take on things and it works exceedingly well. From here, we jump to Cyborg. And this is kind of cool because from my perspective, Cyborg's never really been a character who's been interesting to me. I would never sit down of my own volition and read the Cyborg solo series because Cyborg was never interesting to me. With the character of Cyborg, he gets, again, kind of a cool moment. And that's really seems to be what Snyder's going on, really Snyder's doing here, is it's taking a break away from what we're used to. Because when you sit down and you read almost anything from DC Comics, it usually kind of boils down to like Batman or Superman saving the day. But it's cool to remove things from that. It's cool, you know, to basically walk away from the idea that Batman and Superman are going to save the day. And in fact, in this story, make them what really amount to like background characters and focus on like the lesser respected guys and kind of beef up their popularity. And the way this happens with Cyborg is that because of the fact that this is a tree that basically deals with like, you know, artificial intelligence and so on and so forth, what he ends up doing is using his mother box to sink into the tree and then start, you know, basically tapping into its artificial intelligence. And it's cool because it makes him like an interesting character. It makes him useful for the most part. And so of course, basically reawakening the tree, the idea here is that Snyder also hits on the notion that there are like these apples that grow. The first seed that grew on this planet came in like, this was the first tree that basically popped up. But as the planet began to cater itself towards wisdom, this tree basically died and the wisdom tree grew. But for a reason that's not really explained here, there's significance to this seed of sorts, you know, to this apple of Eden, so to speak. And so as a result, Cyborg doesn't really know what to make of it, but he does know it's important. And so this is when things really begin to sort of pop off and they really begin to boil down. Because what happens here is we basically switch over to Team Mystery, to Superman, to Sinestro, Starfire, and to Starro himself, as well as Martian Manhunter. And to be honest, Scott Snyder, if you ever happen to see this video, this team is so stacked, and I don't understand why he would stack this team so bad. This is a pretty OP team. But the biggest issue they have here is that, again, they're kind of tapping into the minds of these guys, and they haven't quite figured out how to activate, or at least they have figured it out, but they haven't activated their tree yet. The other half of this is that these worlds really amount to hostages. They don't really know what's going to happen. They know that if the Omega Titan consumes the world, all these worlds will die, and all these little mini planets will be destroyed in the process. And so this is one of those things where it's like the moral compass of the superhero community kind of bumps up against what needs to be done. But the cool thing about this is that Snyder could use this to basically bring back long lost concepts in DC Comics. We also end up basically finding out that Tamaran, the home world of Starfire, is locked here. And so it's essentially a way to like bring back the entirety of her people. There's all these cool things that go on, all these cool little themes, these little goodies that Snyder throws into the story that allows us to see the return of things. And so ultimately the response of really Superman and his guys are, okay, Sinestro, create a construct that will get all these worlds off planet. And while you're doing that, we'll buy you time. And so essentially everyone is recalled. And in turn, they all start jumping into the fray for the purpose of just serving as a distraction in order to essentially take out this Omega Titan. Now, the heroes know they can't destroy it, right? I mean, you're talking about an astronomical amount of power. And DC plays it fast and loose when they're talking about like universal scale characters. You don't really see characters on a universal level in the same capacity that you see in Marvel, right? Like the universal landscape of DC is very much undeveloped. Like there's a lot there that we don't know. I think there's ample room to kind of build that up, but DC does fine with what they have. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, it all works. I mean, they're one of the biggest comic book companies in the world. They must be doing something right. And so it's, and so there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with that. But the whole point here is that the various members of the superhero community do what they can. The Justice League, the Teen Titans, more or less, they all kind of do what they can. But at the end of the day, they're not really designed to win. They're really designed to just kind of be a stopgap measure. That's it. And so where Starro is basically destroyed in the process, this leads to like the Omega Titan consuming the entirety of the world, and that's it. And so Kolu basically explodes in its entirety, and it's not really known which members of the Justice League survive. And so picking back up with Green Arrow and Amanda Waller, who have really been in a standoff, you know, regarding this seed on Earth and whether or not they should destroy it, whether or not they should activate it. In the middle of all this, the seed suddenly kicks off, which is exactly what we were told would happen. When Kolu was destroyed and that planet was consumed, the new seed immediately starts sprouting trees. And this is cool. This is a great idea by Scott Snyder, because what it means is we can basically immediately hop from one action-packed event to another. There's no real phase where it's like, okay, well, the planet was destroyed and we've got 3 weeks until the trees grow. Like, they immediately pop up, like they're right there. And so right off the bat, the Earth is in danger. And the reason why is because instead of like the Omega Titans making their way to Earth, gradually getting there, instead, like, they're immediately there. And so they actually get there before the Justice League does, depending on which members of the League survive. So this is cool. And it's a really awesome idea, because Oliver Queen kind of plays the role of the fan. He plays the role of us as the reader, as no, the Justice League will be here. It's only a matter of time. They'll be here and they'll save us. But the response of Amanda Waller is they probably won't. Here's the question you have to ask here. If all these worlds were saved by Sinestro, what resources will they end up bringing? Because Oliver Queen's response was to basically send out an SOS to the Green Lantern Corps. And while the Green Lantern Corps would be cool, we don't really know if the Green Lantern Corps would stand much of a chance against these Omega Titans if they even respond at all. And if they don't get the message in time, then the Justice League with whatever reinforcements show up. My hope is Superboy Prime. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.